We are officially kicking off the mods on the ETM RTR Lite, and boy, I wonder what it could be. You know I had to do it. This little dirt bike is becoming a little sumo, but you know how we do things around here. We're not just gonna buy a kit from Electro Co. That'd be too easy. Nope, we're gonna be doing this like the 60-volt Mototech. Actually, a lot like the 60-volt Mototech. However, if you wanted to, you could just buy a kit from Electro Co. They actually have a couple of sets available, depending on what kind of wheel size you want, anywhere from 300 bucks up to a mag set that's 400 bucks. However, this RTR be DIY, and in this build series, I've set a rule for myself not to rely on any upgrade parts from Electro Co. So I took inspiration from what I already did. This bike has a set of 10-inch Supermoto wheels that derive from two rear wheels of a smaller 36-volt version of this bike, and with a little trimming here and grinding there, I was able to get that rear wheel to fit that front axle. But no 10-inch rims for this bike. The RTR is actually a good deal bigger than the Mototech, so 10-inch rims is going to look absolutely ridiculous. I think 12 will do nicely. From the factory, the RTR and the RTR Lite comes with a 14-inch front and a 12-inch rear, so we're halfway there already. For the rear, it's pretty simple, just slap some rubber on it. The front, on the other hand, is not. This 14 needs to shrink down to a 12 somehow. You're probably waiting for me to say that I bought a second RTR rear rim for this bike, but you'd be wrong because Electro Co's website is off limits for this build and I'm trying to be as cheap as possible. So I have to improvise, and like I said, I'm taking direct inspiration from the Mototech here. Actually, let me rephrase that. I'm just directly taking from the Mototech here, in the form of stealing the 12-inch rear that this thing came with. However, in comparing the compatibility between these two bikes in the last video, one other comparison that I didn't show you was the wheel mounting in the front here, and you'll be disappointed to find out that these two are not a direct fit. So I have some additional tweaks I have to make. But in the meantime, we can at least get set up on the rear here and break into the tires that I've got. And I actually did not cheap out this time. I got Kendas, which are very similar to the ones that you will get on the Electro Co kits. This is a premium bike after all, and I didn't want to be a total cheapskate. And you don't want to see me struggle to take this dirt tire off and put a street tire on. So did I ever mention that I'm really bad at editing? Also, unfortunately, I popped the tube, so I had to do this a few times. Back to the part that matters and the issues that it comes with. The RTR here is bigger, better, beefier, and as a result, it has bigger axles. This is the RTR front axle, which is 15 millimeters wide, and doesn't fit. That's because the Mototech here takes a smaller 12 millimeter front axle. So to make it bigger, I have a couple of extra parts. I have bearings, I have an inner wheel spacer, and I have some various axle spacers, all 15 millimeters inner diameter that's gonna fit the RTR axle perfectly. Now for the fun part, pulling the old bearings and fitting the new ones. There's also this inner spacer here that fits inside the rim between the two bearings. I couldn't find one that was an exact fit, so I bought one that was for sure longer and have already trimmed it down to size. Also, to help with the install, these bearings are nice and frosty. They spent the entire day in the freezer, so that way they should shrink a little bit and it'll make putting it inside of this a little bit easier of a job. That's the sound of a bearing that's fully seated. Now with the axle, look at that, goes through, no problem at all. Well, we're almost there, but there is some hackery left to go. Like the Mototech, because we're fitting a rear rim onto the front axle, there's not enough space here because this assumes that it's not only having a brake rotor, but a sprocket on the other side. So we have to trim down the sprocket side in order for it to fit. Well, that took a lot longer than I anticipated. There was a lot more material that I had to take off this time on the sprocket side of the hub in order for it to fit in here, but it finally fits now, and you might notice some additional parts like this brake rotor. So unfortunately, the RTR's brake rotor in the front is not compatible with the Mototech's hub, but thankfully I had done a big brake kit for the 60-volt Mototech, and that big brake kit is 200 millimeters wide, and that's exactly the same width as the stock brake rotor on the front of the RTR. But everything is not 100% perfect, because while it looks good in here, if I spin it, there's a few things that are rubbing. You wanna know what else is funny? The bolts that are holding on this brake rotor are actually not from this hub. I didn't have those bolts, and these are actually taken from the cage, the frame of the box that the Mototech actually came in. Save your bolts. So we got a few things working against us. Those bolts that I mentioned, while they're as low profile as I can get, they are still rubbing right here against the plastic, and I think there's also another piece probably further down right here that it's rubbing against that we'll have to trim. And then on the other side here, you can see it's actually clearing, but this is the dirt tire we're talking about here, and with the street tire, it's gonna be a little bit wider, so I'm anticipating once that street tire is actually on this rim, that this side right here is gonna have to be trimmed, so I might have to do a cutout right here, kind of like I did with the CRF. So we took off the side here, and you can see this is the part that it's rubbing against on the plastic. Now that's easy enough. We can just cut this out really, and maybe just make this more of a half circle than something that goes into it. I don't think I'm gonna see any issues with that, but the other thing right here, this is clearly rubbing on the bolt. So this, as much as I hate to do it, I probably do have to shave this down just a little bit. I think I voided my warranty. Well, after several rounds of checking this thing, trimming, putting it back on, checking, taking it off, trimming again, we finally have a perfectly silent, minus that little bit of the brake pad, which is perfectly fine, rolling wheel. But we are not done yet, because this is just free spinning on the axle. It has side to side play. We need to find out how big we need to make the axle spacers on this side and this side. So now that we have everything lined up, particularly with the brake rotor right here, I'm gonna make some measurements on either side and find a spacer that I have to see if it fits, or trim one down so that it will fit. Well, it's a new day. We have spacers on both sides, and look at that. It looks absolutely beautiful. And whisper quiet. There is zero rubbing on this thing. I am so stoked. So unfortunately last night I did have to actually trim and make my own size spacers, because unfortunately the variety pack that I found on Amazon didn't have the exact sizing that I needed on either side. So on the brake side right here, this is 11 millimeters, and on the sprocket side, this is 13 millimeters. And yes, even though this is free spinning right now, it's quite obvious though that there are no fork guards, and we did have to make some trims to both sides of this in order to make everything clear. It wouldn't be a Supermoto build without clearance issues. So on the brake side, you saw this already, but I cut this little chunk out of the bottom right here just so it clears the bolts. And then on the other side here, I had to trim out this little crescent shape because it was right up against this tire, and to the point where it wouldn't really free spin, it would just stop right away because it was just barely touching it. So just had to take that out and kind of mirror the sidewall of the tire there, so that way there are no clearance issues. It's a little bit, but that's all it takes. And as a final test, it is free spinning and there is zero rubbing with the fork guards. I say zero rubbing, but you can still kind of hear that little chatter. So what that is are the little rubber nubbin thingies right there that are on the side of the tire. Those are just barely touching this fork guard right here. So it'll make a little bit of a noise for the first few miles, I suppose, but those are gonna fall off eventually, and then it'll be perfectly silent. Also, another interesting thing about this is the brake routing. I didn't have to do anything to that. Normally, there's not enough space when you size down on a tire right here for the brake line to stay inside the fork leg. Normally, you have to reroute it to go to the outside and then down to the caliper, like I do with my other two Supermotos, but in this case, it actually has pretty good clearance. Still plenty of space right there, even though the rim is further down and closer to this cable routing, so excellent. People won't have to notice it. Now that we got all that figured out, we can take a look at the finished product and see just how good this thing looks. Only one thing left to do.
And try it, of course. Oh, it feels so good already. Nice and smooth. I can't emphasize how nice a smooth feeling ride is on an upright bike like this on the street. It's just, oh, it's so good. It's still quite noisy though, that drivetrain. We gotta address that at some point, but not today. But this isn't the last thing. We actually need to tally up the cost of all of this and see how much we saved.
Now, even though adding Supermoto wheels doesn't improve the overall performance of this bike, I'm still confident that I can include this in my $1,000 budget and still come out on top. Unless I can't, in which case I'll take it out because I make the rules. And as we tally this up, we're gonna compare it against the equivalent Electro Co kit, which also happens to be the cheapest. As of recording this goes for 250 bucks. Priciest piece by far were the tires themselves, and like I said, I didn't cheap out on these. They were $56 each. Although that's a bit of a lie, because of all the choices that I found, every price was about 50 bucks and up. So spending an extra $12 on a set with a recognizable name rather than something off-brand really wasn't too hard to justify. Second most expensive piece to this puzzle was the front brake rotor. Now, I designed this myself, but I don't have the materials or the tools in order to make it, so it cost me $42 from Send Cut Send. And that's a lot for a single brake rotor, I admit that, but in this case, I really couldn't go anywhere other than custom, and with the pricing structure that Senkatsen has, it encourages you to buy more of the product for a better deal. But I didn't want to get hundreds or even thousands of these just so I can get a good price per rotor. I don't really think that many people are as dumb as I am to attempt this. Unless you are, let me know. Then there was the Mototech rear rim that I used, which was free. It was a takeoff part that's been sitting around as spares, so fair game. Same with the inner tubes, although technically I did pinch one of those when I was doing the rear tire, so I guess you could add an extra $10 if you wanted to. Then we got down to all the small stuff. Everything else I was able to find freely on Amazon. The bearings were $13, and I actually got 4 of them instead of 2, so I have a couple of spares. And the axle spacers were $10. I also got an additional set of assorted spacers for $7, but I actually didn't end up needing those ones because the original $10 pack I was able to get all the spacers that I needed. So from what I used, my grand total was $176.54, saving me about $72 and change from the Electro Co kit, which if you think about it is a really terrible deal. I will freely admit that, especially if you're putting this together and you have to get the Mototech rim on top of all that. That's an extra $40 to the cost, and at that point you're getting dangerously close to the Electro Co kit, which not only comes with 2 rims, but they are fully mounted with the tires already. That's an additional headache you don't have to worry about. Plus, it comes with brake rotors, a chain, and all of the hardware. For $250, you really can't beat that price. But regardless, this kit is pretty damn good, and it feels even better. In fact, it's starting to become kind of the big brother to the other 60-volt Supermoto I got in the garage. Maybe it's time these two get stacked up against each other.